communicating with me about everything that's going on in the wedding industry right now, and how people can still have events. Is it a good time to get married? I think it is. Why wait? So, good morning, Haylee. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm in League City right now. Where are you at?
I am in League City as well, just living the life in the apartment with the dog and the husband for the time being.
What kind of dog do you have?
He's a pit mix.
What kind of
He's a
husband do you
big,
have?
well,
A good
also a
one?
pit mix. No. An excellent one. The one
Yeah.
who's at work right now.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So you work with weddings, you work in events. So obviously, I know you would pick a great husband as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So how long have you been working in like events and weddings, and where did all of that come from? Where did it start?
Yeah. So I have been in different parts of the industry for over a decade now. I actually got my wedding planning certification 10 years ago when I was still a teenager. Um, and before that, I had worked for my cousin who's a caterer, just doing catering things for him, and then eventually doing some of the admin side of that. And my mother does wedding cake. So it just kind of was something I was born into, but didn't officially start working, as a good of age able to be working person until I was after I was 17. I got my planner certification. After that, I eventually ran a venue for a while. I worked for florists, and then about 3 years ago or so is whenever I started my business.
Okay, that's awesome. Very cool, very cool. So, my wife, whenever we got married, we had there was an event planner that kind of helped oversee some stuff, especially the day of, because it was like a rush of emotions and
Mm-hmm.
everybody. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go on, so it's good to have somebody in your corner. But for her,
Sure.
some of the stuff she had planned because she'd been dreaming about it for forever, and then once it was over, it was almost like, what do I do? What do I do now? And for you, is that a benefit? Like, hey, you just get to plan, this awesome event, a wedding, over and over and over.
It is. It's a huge benefit, and I always say like the post wedding blues are real. You spent almost a year in some cases, sometimes more, sometimes less. Dedicating the other hours of your work week to planning this event, and then you just kind of don't know what to do with yourself after. But that's definitely a huge benefit for me. After I got married, it was kind of the same thing. It was like, man, this kind of stinks. Like I don't know what else to do. And at that point, I wasn't planning, actively. So it was definitely time. Right after I got married, I jumped right into the venues, and it's like, okay, this is it. This is what I need to be doing.
Do you have any advice for the post wedding blues?
Prepare for it beforehand. Know that you're going to feel it. If wedding planning is something that you're enjoying doing, you're probably going to feel it. So I always suggest, it may sound kind of basic, but pick up a hobby, with your new spouse, plan things to do to keep your mind off of it, give yourself other projects that are going to be for after the wedding. That way you keep yourself occupied and you don't just feel like there's all this extra time that you don't know what to do with.
Okay, and so can you tell me the name of the business? And I think you said it's been about 3 or 4 years. The name of the business, and then what all you handle.
Yeah, so it's water to wine events. We do full service planning and design, as well as wedding management, which is similar to like a day of coordination, except I'm kind of on the line of there's half the wedding industry uses day of coordination, half of them don't. I like to say there's no such thing as day of coordination because you should never just let somebody jump in the day of and expect them to produce whatever you've been planning for last year. So we start way in advance, even if it's that wedding management or day of package. We start with them from the very beginning, make sure they have all the tools to plan their wedding the right way, give them templates and worksheets and things just to keep them organized. And then again, we do full service planning and design where we do everything from the concept, working with your florists and rentals to sourcing every single vendor, basically doing everything that we can do without actually, having to ask you. So obviously I can't make your guest list. I can't tell your uncle to sit with this cousin who he doesn't like. So those things that people have to do themselves, they do, and then I pretty much do the rest.
Yeah, are there things that you kind of have to you remind people like for situations to avoid situations like that? Be like, okay, is there any reason why this won't work? Just to double check through a list that somebody made, or did you forget anybody? What about great uncle whoever,
Absolutely.
right?
For sure. So in the very beginning, regardless of what level package they book with us, I have all of my clients fill out a questionnaire, and it goes through those things. Is there any maybe like medical history? Does anybody have a pacemaker so they can't be seated next to a speaker? Anybody who has epilepsy, so we need to avoid flashing lights? Or do you have any family members who you think may be an issue on the wedding day or shouldn't be sat next to each other? We give them lots of those questionnaires. So even though we're doing the legwork of things, they still have all the stuff to answer because we want to make sure that it is personal to them. I don't like to just crank out weddings on a conveyor belt and, they're all cookie cutter. Everybody's situation is different. So just giving them those tools to think about those things. Because I always tell my brides, whenever they come to me, if they're brides and grooms, but if they come to me in the beginning and they're like, everybody just keeps asking me all these questions and I don't know, so I need help. I always say, if you've never planned a wedding, how are you supposed to know how to plan a wedding?
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way until you're doing it. So I make sure that everybody has the tools they need to answer all those questions before they become an issue or remain a question.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier whenever you were talking, you said brides, and you were like, well, brides and grooms, because it's important what the groom wants too, right? But usually, is it the bride and the mom or some of the family that's kind of making those arrangements? What do you generally see?
So, I get a lot of kind of bride on the own with groom as that kind of secondary person. Obviously, they're not secondary. Some grooms are, just not super interested, but I actually have a lot of grooms who are very involved. They're in on almost every meeting that we have, and they some things they'll say, I don't care too much about that, let them decide. But others, like especially typically it's food and music. Those are the two things guys typically really like to be involved with. So make sure that they are included. I can tell you, whenever I was a bride myself, we went to a vendor consultation. I was with my husband, and they pretty much just avoided eye contact with him and would like full on like turn their body towards me away from him and said, "What do you want?" I was like, he's kind of an important part of this too. Mm-hmm. So I try to make sure that everybody is involved.
Yeah, my job was to show up. That was it. And, I was asked a lot of stuff, whenever I got married, and my wife, she's awesome. We had a great wedding. Thanks to her and the wedding planners and family and everything else. But yeah, my job was to show up. They asked me and I was like, what? That all sounds great. Like, I trust you. And so I was just given the task of being there. I liked it.
If that's like the dynamic that works for a certain couple, that's perfect. As long as we've asked, and made sure that's all the input somebody wants.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the name, Water to Wine event? So when I think of water to wine, I think of the story in the Bible, and it's a miracle. It's the first miracle. Can you explain how you came across that name?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Christian, so I've always kind of, the wedding at Cana in John chapter 2 has always been something that, from Sunday school, it's something you learn about, it's Jesus's first miracle. And I thought it was really appropriate since it happened at a wedding. I in no way want it to sound like I'm comparing things, but it's like, it was at a wedding, and turn water, something so simple and rudimentary, into wine, something that was a huge blessing, extravagant. So I just thought the name fit really well, and it represented my faith without being too
overly hitting them on the head with it. No, it's subtle. Exactly. And it sounds like elegant. And when I think of it, I'm like, that's a miracle. And like the union of two people coming together is something very special. Mm-hmm. And, for it to last in today's age, sometimes it does take a miracle. On a local news organization, mm-hmm. I-45 Now, I saw that there was a wedding, like a celebration post. It was like, they've been married, I think it was like 70 years. Like, that's so beautiful. It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. So right now I'm talking to Haylee. I'm talking to Haylee Handly, Water to Wine Events, about event planning, weddings and all the things that are going on. Specifically right now, what is going on right now with weddings and clients that you've had? How is it going?
Yeah, so things are, we're just kind of taking them as they come. Things change about every 5 seconds with, different orders and guidelines. So initially everything from spring and summer got pushed to fall. Now we're looking at some fall postponements as well. Right now there's guidelines in Texas for venues at 50% capacity, tables of no more than 10, but people who are in your household, and then tables that are 6 feet apart. So it can work in some situations. If you're, already maxed out with your occupancy at your venue, it's a little bit harder to do that. So couples are unfortunately right now being faced with either drastically downsizing their wedding, or potentially moving it on, to another date, if they're able to get all their vendors aligned. So it's a tricky situation to be in. It's not one that I definitely don't envy my clients having to make that hard decision. A lot of people have people flying in, and not just from out of state, but out of country, and so there's a lot of travel bans and things like that. But the weddings that are going on that are not being postponed, we've seen a lot of really great success in. I haven't had any yet this fall myself, but from other wedding planners and people in the industry, I mean, people are still having a great time, even if it's maybe having little pods of dancing rather than one big giant dance floor. People are still getting out there and they're having fun, and people are still getting married at the end of the day and enjoying themselves.
See, I always try and find the positive in things. So I'm going to ask a question. So like typically, what is a big wedding? Like how many people are invited to a big wedding, would you say?
So a little bit, for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, the perspective. I consider a big wedding to be 160 to 250 plus. That's a pretty big size wedding. An average size wedding is like 120 to 150 or so. And then a smaller wedding, you can't even call that small. 100 people is still a lot of people, but
I guess it depends on the venue too,
It depends on the venue, and honestly the people. I mean, I had quite a few people, 175 plus to my wedding, and my very best friend was like, what? She's like, she said, I don't want more than, 90 people there. That's too many. But so we're seeing a good bit of, which was already kind of a trend. We were already seeing a shift to smaller weddings and what people are calling micro weddings. So 25, to 50, but just definitely under 100. That was really becoming more popular. And now it's definitely becoming more popular. And people are finding ways to really celebrate in those intimate groups, whether that's what they, that's what they do completely, or they have another celebration or reception the next year. Mm-hmm. But I think people are really getting on board with those smaller groups, which is really great.
That's what I think the benefit is, because I look at my wedding and I guess it was kind of big, right? But I go back and I looked at wedding photos maybe like a month ago or so, and I was looking at the reception. I'm like, I didn't even know this person was there. They were there. I did not know they were there at all. Mm-hmm. Think about the money that could have been saved. Think about if it was like 20, 25 people that were there, and you can still have your wedding, everything, probably save some money for like the honeymoon or for a reception later. You can still have that awesome event.
Oh, absolutely. I look at my guest book and I'll read it and I'm like, they were there. Like, I thought they didn't show up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're seeing, even if couples have the same budget, they're able to allocate it in a way that's, more special to them. They're able to really prioritize things. If one party is like, I want this to be the most beautiful thing you've ever walked into and just flowers everywhere, they can do that if they've got 50 people. And if one person's like, I want a, 5-course gourmet meal on a silver platter, like we can do that too when you have 50 people. Mm-hmm. So, a budget for 100 people versus the same budget for 200 people is vastly different for what you end up getting.
Is that the way that you go about planning an event? You kind of say, okay, what's your budget? What's important? And then you kind of rank and go from there?
Absolutely. So I like to have a budget conversation early and often. I don't think money should be a topic that's taboo or, off limits. Because you don't want to end up spending way more than you were intending just because nobody wanted to talk about it. So I talk about, what their ideal budget is and kind of present them with, here's what you can get for that budget for your ideal guest count. If you wanted to up your budget, here's what we can do. If you want to, lower your guest count, here's what we can do. But I always start with that same questionnaire that I talked about in the beginning, talking about their priorities, and not just, do you want to see flowers? Do you want to see more food? Do you want a band versus a DJ? But what do you like to do in your spare time? Like, how do you spend time together? If they're like huge foodies, like we're probably going to put a lot of money into the food and the catering and make it like a really cool, immersive experience. It's something that they're going to remember and their guests are going to remember. And maybe we, don't do favors that people are going to leave behind and things like that.
Okay. This is KHEA Radio 99.5 FM. If you're looking to get married maybe renew your vows, you're looking to plan an event, water to wine events with Haylee Handly is an option for you. And Haylee, are you originally from this area?
I'm not actually. I am from about 70 miles northwest of here, a little town called Simonton, just out in the middle of nowhere. A bunch of
It's still in It's in Texas though.
And trees. So,
is it still in Texas? I think I lost you for a second.
oh yeah, I lost you for a second. It is in Texas.
Okay.
It's west of KD, Fulshire, going out to the middle of nowhere. And then I moved to Galveston about 5 years ago. Well, a little over 5 years ago, whenever my husband and I got married, and now we're in League City.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. And I like our area. There's a lot of wedding venues and caterers and a bunch of people. Do you? I think as an event planner, it's always important for you to just, I guess, like meet people and keep those relationships, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And there's so many great vendors down here. There's networking groups, but there's really just kind of even going door to door sometimes and meeting up for a cup of coffee. Well, when we can meet up for a cup of coffee, yeah. Right now it's virtually, is so important just to make sure that we're all connected and we all, have a finger on the pulse of what's happening down here.
Do you have any events, whether it's a wedding or anything else, that kind of stick out that you look back and you say like, wow, that was a perfect event? I know all of them are great probably for the bride and the groom, but one for you that said that was magic.
So one that I really, really, really loved was actually down at the Bride Museum Conservatory in Galveston. Actually, most of our vendors were from this Bay Area, so that's really neat. Everything at first all just went off without a hitch. It was initially we were going to have their wedding in her parents' backyard. We were going to have a tent, bring everything in, and then they just were like, you know what? It's not quite worth it. There's too much prep that needs to be done. We're going to move to a venue. So we ended up booking the venue in end of October, and the wedding was end of December. So pretty much everything was being booked from that point. But it was so great. Everything just went so well. Everybody was dancing the whole night. And one of my favorite parts, which is a little bit self-serving, but one of my favorite parts was this was a client who we'd done all the planning and the design for. So she'd seen everything on paper, seen some, inspiration photos, things like that. But she walked into the conservatory in the room, and she and her mother did together for that room reveal before the ceremony. And they just both started crying. And, she said, I can't believe, it's more than what I thought it was going to be. And she just did the biggest hug. And like I said, it's a little self-serving for that to be my favorite, but it was just such a good moment. And that's why I do it, just not for me to feel so good, but just for them to just be so happy with the day and just be so excited.
Yeah. Can you explain what that design, because it's, event planning and design, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. So I take them through at the beginning of the planning process, take them through that questionnaire I was talking about, things they like, things they don't like, who they are as a couple, what they enjoy doing together, and then things, like what colors do you enjoy? Do you like patterns and prints, and just take them through all sorts of questions. And then I build out an inspiration board for just the overall aesthetic of their wedding, kind of give them a good feel for what the vibe of the wedding is going to be. And then I go into much further, like 20 to 40 page long of basically every single part of their wedding. So what the flowers are going to look like, how the flow of the day is going to be, if we're renting furniture, just what the ceremony is going to look like. So really just putting their entire wedding day on paper for them at the very beginning.
So you pretty much do like a master thesis for each event where it has nothing left out of there.
Exactly. Wow. I mean, every little detail is on there. And then I go work with each individual vendor after that. So I take that once the client has approved it, I take it to the florist and we work together, and they get input because they're artists, on their own. They don't need me to tell them how to do their jobs. So, we all work together to make sure that vision comes to life for the couple.
Okay, that's awesome. So how far in advance should you start planning a wedding? Like if you're getting married in 2021, 2022, like even like 3 years from now, or if for some reason they want to trying to get married this fall, like when can you realistically start planning, or how far ahead should you start planning?
So if you're getting married anytime between now and 2021, now is definitely the time to start planning. Definitely booking your key vendors, the ones who are going to be really the most important to you. So like your venue, your photographer, and hopefully your planner. That way you get them locked down. There are some of the main ones who, don't take more than one, wedding on a single day or even a single week sometimes. So, and especially since so many people from 2020 are now being pushed into 2021, some of that date availability is slimmed down. So now's a good time to start planning. But the average engagement timeline we have is typically anywhere from 12 to 18 months. We have people who get married in 4 months, but if you can make it work and you can find those vendors you love within that time, that's great. But 12 to 18 months is usually a good time. Too much more than that, you don't want to book too many vendors and really, commit yourself to too many decisions, because a lot can change over a year. Your taste can change, trends can change. You can just find yourself seeing inspiration from other things and going, I think I want to adjust everything I've planned in the first 6 months.
Yeah. How often do trends change?
Pretty regularly. So in Texas, really in central, the central area, we actually get trends trickle down to us. So typically they start in the West Coast or the East Coast. They're very different. And then they kind of just make their way through middle America. So the people, the designers, and us who we're watching that so we can kind of be prepared for what's about to come to us. They change pretty often. There's some that unfortunately just kind of stick around and you wish you could get rid of them. But there's,
do you ever talk to your people and say, be bold, let's start a trend here? I think this could be a trend and we can push it out to the East and the West Coast. Let's do something crazy.
If I had a couple who was just super spontaneous and bold and wanted to do something fresh and fun, 100%. It all just depends on the couple. I always try to, make sure that even if we're pulling inspiration from other trends, it's customized to them. I don't want to just pull a picture off of, Pinterest and replicate it, verbatim or anything. But yeah, it's interesting how everything kind of trickles down.
Okay, and this may be the most important question of the entire conversation, right? Have you ever seen the show Married at First Sight or 90 Day Fiancé or any of that like garbage television that's out there?
I've seen a couple of episodes, but like years ago, when those shows first came out. I don't have cable right now.
Yeah.
So I've seen clips of them on Facebook, and it's just cringy and horrible to watch.
It is.
Just
but
so
also
entertaining.
But also July 15th, the new season of Married at First Sight premieres on Lifetime. So just in case. Like during quarantine, me and my wife, when the kids would go to bed or any opportunity, it's like a guilty cringe, like, oh, this is like, why are we watching this? Turn it off. And then just like, I wonder what happens, literally couples for the first time married at first sight. It's ridiculous. It's a crazy idea. Yeah. I mean, and you work with couples all the time. I'm sure you're not surprised what usually happens on the TV show side, but yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. I actually have a friend or an acquaintance who, whenever I very first met her, she said, yeah, I'm from, and she's not, from somewhere super far away, like, some people are in the shows, but she's like, I'm from Canada. She said, have you ever seen the show 90 Day Fiancé? And she said, it's like that. And I misunderstood. And I thought she said she was on 90 Day Fiancé. So I went home and started Googling her. And she's like, I can't find your episode. And she's like, okay, Haylee. She said, it was like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
I was like, well, that's embarrassing.
That is funny. That's funny. I'm talking to Haylee Handly with Water to Wine Events. This is KHEA Radio. Haylee, is there anything else you would like to share or let people know how they can get in contact with you, check your website, social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something I'd like to share is if you are getting married right now, you're engaged or soon to be, please just keep your head held high, get connected with some great, wedding professionals and just lean into their advice. You can still have the wedding you've imagined, whether it's, 250 people or if it's 10 people, just, be patient, things will pass and everything will happen the way it's supposed to be. But yeah, everybody can reach me at watertowineevents.com, and that's all spelled out, T-O, not the number 2. And then same thing on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. They can find me at Water to Wine Events.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining today, Haylee.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.